Well, we are headed back to Washington, where Peter Cook is now joined by Lehman's bankruptcy lawyer, Harvey Miller. Peter?
Betty, thanks very much. I am joined by Harvey Miller. He's of Weil Gotshal in New York, one of Wall Street's best-known lawyers. He is Lehman's lawyer as well. Mr. Miller, thank you for the time. You're one of the key witnesses here today, along with Dick Fuld, of course. And I want to get your sense about what we're going to hear later on this afternoon. Is it your view that Lehman still could have been saved and that the government should have stepped in, as it did for some of its competitors, as Mr. Fuld will testify?
Yes, I believe that the government could have gone down an alternative path, which would have avoided the severe consequences of the bankruptcy.
And it will lead you to that conclusion, because we've heard even from regulators this morning, Scott Alvarez, who's the general counsel of the Federal Reserve, who says, listen, there wasn't an option for us here. Lehman lacked the collateral to guarantee that taxpayers could be repaid in the future. Do you challenge that?
Yes, because if you look what happened on September 15th and the week following, is that in that week it's estimated $700 billion of value disappeared. The commercial paper markets froze up. The government could have sponsored a wind-down plan, an orderly wind-down for Lehman. It wasn't a bailout, but allow Lehman to wind down its affairs. It would not have had the same catastrophic circumstances.
The contention is there was no legal pathway for the government to do that. Well,
you know, I think Secretary Paulson said that the government did not have the tools. Funny, on Tuesday they found $80 billion for AIG. He must have found a screwdriver or something.
What does it tell you that 2 years after Lehman's collapse, we're still debating these issues, still talking about these issues? What do you think would have happened if Lehman had been given assistance?
I think the consequences, failure was going to happen at some point in time, but the consequences would have been much less severe. You would not have had a crisis of confidence. You have to remember, in every single financial crisis up until that time, there was always intervention. If you go back to long-term capital management, which is almost a template for what happened, the Federal Reserve put a lot of pressure on the street to put up money. The conservatorship of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, Bear Stearns. Every single incident of financial crisis, there was always intervention.
Now, you know that there are those who are going to look at Mr. Fuld's testimony today, as they have in the past, and say, listen, Dick Fuld and the folks at Lehman Brothers are not owning up to their own responsibilities. They could have done something earlier, fixed this investment bank sooner. Again, you want to respond to that?
I'm certainly not an expert on everything that happened on Lehman. I only came into the situation that week. Yes, where were the regulators? If you read the examiner's report in the Lehman bankruptcy case, he has a whole section on the failure of regulation. And that's all part of the program that was, I guess, instituted under the Bush administration to deregulate. So you had a battle between the Federal Reserve and you had a battle with the SEC as to who was regulating Lehman. Lehman got over 40-to-1 leverage. That's a lot of leverage. Who was watching over the subprime mortgage crisis? There were a lot of signs. Somebody in the hearing room just asked Mr. Alvarez, well, you had all these signs. Why didn't anybody do anything? I think there was a failure of regulation.
Let me ask you the current state of play right now. You've obviously kept track of what's happening on Wall Street, the regulatory changes here in Washington. Do you think institutions remain too big to fail, that the government's going to be forced to step in again?
Too big to fail, as I will say at the hearing, I think, is a very seductive phrase. The real issue is, what are the consequences of failure? How do you deal with those consequences? How do you mitigate the effects of that consequence? There will always be institutions that are so large and have such a prospect of systemic risk that some kind of intervention is mandatory.
One final question for you. As you look at the situation that happened at Lehman Brothers, obviously you believe that there was a decision made by the government not to help Lehman Brothers. Why? Why would it have been in the government's interest not to help Lehman and yet help AIG a day later?
I'll give you a preview if I'm asked that question. I believe the government miscalculated. The government said that, I think the government was thinking that after Bear Stearns and all of the negative press about Lehman, that the financial markets and the public had reconciled itself that Lehman was going to fail. And therefore, Monday, September 15th, would be sort of a difficult day. A lot of notoriety, a lot of turmoil. Tuesday, it would lessen. And Wednesday, Lehman would be a historical fact. Did not happen that way, because what the government did, is it betrayed all the expectations of the street and others.
All right. Mr. Miller, we thank you very much for the time. I know you've got your testimony this afternoon.